The morning sky over Seoul turned black. At exactly 9:47 a.m., Taeyong stood on the observation deck of the orbital defense station, watching the impossible unfold before his eyes. Massive ships materialized from nothing, their crystalline surfaces reflecting Earth's sunlight in 1,000 different colors. They were beautiful in the way a tsunami was beautiful right before it destroyed everything in its path. Commander, we're getting reports from every major city, his communications officer said, her voice shaking. London, New York, Tokyo, Moscow. They're everywhere. Taeyong had spent 30 years in the military. He had fought in the Mars colonial wars, survived the Jupiter station siege, and seen things that would break most people, but this was different. These ships were larger than anything humans had ever built. Each one could swallow a city whole. How many? He asked, keeping his voice steady for his crew. 43 ships worldwide, more appearing every minute. Down on Earth, people stopped in the streets, cars halted on highways. Everyone looked up at the alien vessels, hanging in the sky like dark clouds. For the first few minutes, there was only silence. Then the screaming began. Dr. Nari was in her laboratory when the ships arrived. She was a xenobiologist, someone who studied the possibility of alien life. She had spent her entire career preparing for first contact. She had written papers, created protocols, imagined 1,000 different scenarios. None of them looked like this. Her phone rang. It was the United Earth Council. Dr. Nari, we need you at the emergency summit immediately. You're our first contact specialist. She grabbed her tablet and ran to the transport. Her hands were shaking. This was what she had trained for, but fear gripped her chest like a vice as she flew toward the council building. She could see one of the alien ships hovering over the city. It was so large it blocked out the sun. On Luna Base, Captain DeJoe was already scrambling his fighter squadron. He was one of Earth's best pilots, known for flying missions others thought impossible, but as he launched from the moon's surface and saw the alien fleet with his own eyes, even he felt his confidence waver. Stay in formation. He ordered his pilots. We don't know if they're hostile yet, but deep down he knew ships didn't arrive like this for peaceful purposes. In the underground districts of Seoul, Hana was organizing a community meeting when the power flickered. Her neighborhood was home to workers, artists, and people who kept the city running from below. They had learned to handle problems on their own because help rarely came from above. What's happening? Someone asked. Hana checked her device. The news was everywhere. Alien ships, hundreds of them. She looked at the frightened faces around her and made a decision. Everyone, stay calm. Go home and gather supplies. Food, water, medicine. Stay with your families. We'll get through this together. People trusted Hana. She had helped them through strikes, disasters, and hard times. They listened to her now. 72 hours. That was the message the alien sent. It appeared on every screen, every device, every display on Earth. The words were in perfect human languages, translated flawlessly. We are the Cathal Empire. Your world is now ours. You have 72 hours to surrender. Resistance will be met with destruction. This is your only warning. Commander Taeyong attended the emergency council meeting via hologram. Leaders from every nation argued about what to do. Some wanted to surrender immediately, others wanted to fight Most were simply paralyzed with fear. We should negotiate, the European delegate said. Maybe they want resources. We can offer trade. Trade, Taeyang said, his voice hard. They didn't come here to trade, they came to conquer. Dr. Nari was asked to attempt communication. She broadcast a message toward the nearest ship using every frequency humans knew. She offered peace, cooperation, knowledge sharing. The response came 3 hours later. Single Cethal appeared on screens. Worldwide, it was tall, perhaps 8 ft, with crystalline skin that seemed to shift colors. Its eyes were cold and ancient. We do not negotiate with animals, it said. You will serve or you will die. There is no third option. We have taken 40 worlds. Yours is simply the next. The transmission ended. Nari felt sick. She had hoped for communication, for understanding. Instead, she saw only contempt in those alien eyes. Humans weren't potential friends or even worthy enemies. They were just obstacles to be removed. 72 hours ticked away. Earth's militaries mobilized, but what could they do? The Cethal ship shrugged off every scan attempt. Their technology was centuries, maybe millennia, ahead of humanity's. Taeyang prepared the orbital defense fleet anyway. It was all they had. Sir, this is suicide, his second officer said quietly. Our weapons won't even scratch those ships. Probably not, Taeyang agreed, but we have to try. Captain Dezhou and his squadron waited in orbit, their fighters looking like toys compared to the alien vessels. He thought about his family down on Earth. His sister, his nephew, his friends. Everything he loved was down there. All pilots, listen up, he said over the squadron channel. I won't lie to you. We're outmatched, outgunned, out of our league, but if we don't stand up now, who will? If we don't fight for our home, what are we worth? The pilots were scared. He could hear it in their breathing, see it in how their ships drifted slightly in formation. But not one of them left. Hana watched from underground as the deadline approached. She had prepared her neighborhood as best she could. Food stored, water purified, medical supplies distributed. People huddled together in basement and tunnels waiting. Do you think they'll really attack? Young man asked her. Hana looked at him. Honestly, yes, I think they will. Then why are we hiding? Shouldn't we evacuate? Evacuate where? They're everywhere. At least down here we're together. The 72 hours expired at 9:47 a.m. exactly 3 days after the ships first appeared. For 5 minutes nothing happened. Some people dared to hope maybe the aliens were bluffing, maybe they would leave. Then the sky lit up. Energy beams lanced down from the Cethal ships, striking military bases, government buildings, power stations. The attacks were precise and devastating. In seconds, Earth's major defenses were crippled. Taeyang watched from orbit as his home burned. All ships engage, he ordered. The human fleet surged forward. It was brave and desperate and completely outmatched. Cethal shields absorbed their weapons like raindrops. Return fire sliced through human ships like paper. Dezhou squadron dove at the nearest alien vessel, firing everything they had. Missiles exploded harmlessly against invisible barriers. Energy weapons scattered into nothing. Break off! Break off! Dezhou shouted as the alien ship returned fire. 3 of his pilots died in an instant. Their fighters vaporized. On Earth, Cethal landing craft descended. Massive doors opened and Alien soldiers emerged, towering and armored, carrying weapons that hummed. With power, they marched into cities. Unopposed, human soldiers fired rifles and rockets. But nothing penetrated the alien shields. It was a massacre. In Seoul, Hana heard the explosions. Above, she held a crying child stroking her hair. It's okay, we're safe down here, but she didn't know if that was true. Dr. Nari watched the invasion from the council bunker, tears streaming down her face. This was her nightmare. Contact with aliens should have been humanity's greatest moment. Instead, it might be their last. Commander Taeyong and LT Lunk and GTS ship was dying. Half his fleet was gone. The Seathal hadn't even deployed their full forces. This was just a warning, sir. We have to retreat, his officer said. Taeyong looked at Earth below, wrapped in fire and smoke. Every instinct screamed at him to keep fighting, but dying here accomplished nothing. All ships fall back to the dark side of the moon. We regroup and we adapt. As is damaged fleet limped away, Taeyong made a promise. They had lost this battle. Aliens were stronger, more advanced, more powerful in every way, but humanity had one advantage the Seathal didn't understand yet. Humans didn't know how to quit. They would learn, adapt, and find a way to fight back. The invasion had begun, but so had the resistance. The first week of occupation was chaos. The Seathal established control zone every major city. Their towers rose overnight, black crystalline structures that hummed with energy. From these towers they broadcast orders in every human language. All citizens must register, all weapons must be surrendered, all resistance will be punished with death. Some people obeyed. They were tired, scared, and broken. They lined up at the registration centers, hoping cooperation would save them. The Seathal scanned them, tagged them with tracking implants, and sent them to work camps or housing blocks, but others refused. Commander Taeyong operated from a hidden bunker deep in the Alps. His fleet was scattered, his forces decimated, but he was far from defeated. He spent 18 hours a day coordinating resistance cells across the globe. We can't fight them head on, he told his officers during a secure communication. We're not strong enough, but we can make them bleed. We can make Earth so expensive that they decide we're not worth the cost. It was guerrilla warfare on a planetary scale. Hit and run, strike and fade, never give the enemy a target they could destroy. In Seoul, Hana's underground network had become a lifeline for thousands. The tunnels beneath the city were vast, built over centuries. The Seathal knew the surface, but down below was human territory. She organized supply runs, coordinated safe houses, and passed messages between resistance groups. Her people moved at night through sewers and subways and forgotten passages. One night, a runner came to her with news. There's a Cathol patrol coming through the old market district, same route, same time every night. Hana looked at her map. The market district had narrow streets and many buildings. Good ambush territory. How many aliens? 6, always 6. She gathered her best people, 12 fighters, mostly workers and students who had never held weapons before the invasion. But they were angry, determined, and they knew the city. We don't try to kill them, Hana explained. Their shields are too strong. Instead, we separate them, confuse them, make them think there are hundreds of us when there's only 12. They prepared for 3 days, rigged buildings to collapse, planted false signatures that mimicked human heat, created a maze of blocked streets and dead ends. When the Sea-Thal patrol entered the market district, everything went wrong for them. An explosion sealed off their exit, another blocked their advance. The aliens activated their shields and raised their weapons, but they couldn't see the enemy. Humans were above them, below them, around them. Hana's people dropped sections of buildings, not to kill, but to separate. One alien got trapped in a collapsed passage, another was isolated in a dead-end alley. The precise formation the Sea-Thal relied on was broken. Now Hana shouted. They hit the isolated alien with everything: Molotov cocktails, makeshift explosives, even thrown rubble. The shield held for 30 seconds, then it flickered, then it failed. The Sea-Thal soldier went down. It was the first one Earth had captured alive. They dragged it into the tunnels before the others could respond. By the time Sea-Thal reinforcements arrived, the market district was empty. Only rubble and smoke remained. Dr. Nari examined the captured alien. A secret lab. It was unconscious, wounded but alive. She had so many questions. Can we communicate with it? Taeyang asked over a secure line. Maybe. But I need time. We don't have time. The Sea-Thal will destroy the entire district. Looking for it, Nari worked through the night. She analyzed the alien's biology, its armor, its technology. Everything she learned, she shared with resistance groups worldwide. When the Sea-Thal woke up, it looked at her with those cold, shifting eyes. You have made a grave mistake, it said in perfect Korean. You cannot win. No species has ever defeated the Sea-Thal empire. How many worlds have you conquered? Nari asked. 4 before yours. Some surrendered immediately. Others fought for days. The longest resistance lasted 2 weeks. All ended the same way, complete submission. And if a world never submitted, the alien seemed confused by the question. That has never happened. It is impossible. Lesser species cannot stand against us. Nari leaned forward. We've been fighting for a week and we're not stopping. What does your empire do with impossible situations? The alien had no answer. Meanwhile, Captain Dejo was learning hard lessons. In orbit, he had lost too many pilots fighting the traditional way. Their weapons couldn't penetrate Sea-Thal shield. Their ships were too slow, too weak. But he noticed something during the battles. The alien shield stopped energy weapons and explosives perfectly, but physical objects, asteroids, debris, even garbage, passed through at certain speeds. Shields were designed to let harmless objects through so they didn't waste power, stopping every dust particle. What if weaponized that? He asked his engineer. They ran simulations. If a solid object was moving fast enough but didn't have an explosive signature, it could penetrate the shield in the split second before the shield adjusted. Dejo's squadron retrofitted their fighters. They stripped out energy weapons and loaded tungsten rods, basically large bullets. They practiced hitting targets at extreme velocities using gravity assist and velocity calculations. The next time Sea-Thal fighters intercepted them, Dejo's pilots flew a different pattern. They didn't try to dogfight. Instead, they slingshot around the moon, building incredible speed, and fired their tungsten rods. The rods punched through the Sea-Thal shields like they weren't there. 3 alien fighters exploded. before they could adapt. It wasn't much. Earth lost 4 ships to kill 3, but it was proof humans could hurt them. Word spread through the resistance. The aliens weren't invincible. Tiang coordinated strikes across the planet. Resistance cells attacked supply convoys, sabotaged Cethal equipment, and freed prisoners from work camps. Every attack was small, careful, calculated to cause maximum disruption with minimum risk. The Cethal responded with brutality. They leveled entire neighborhoods where attacks originated. They executed civilians as examples. They broadcast the executions as warnings, but humanity didn't break. In Moscow, resistance fighters destroyed a Cethal communication hub. In Cairo, they poisoned a water supply the aliens used. In Tokyo, they hacked into the occupation network and spread propaganda. Hana's network grew. She connected groups from different cities, different countries. They shared tactics, resources, and hope. Tunnels beneath Seoul became a symbol. If humans could hold there, they could hold anywhere. She met with Taeyang via secure hologram. His face was gaunt, aged years in just weeks, but his eyes still burned with determination. "We're hurting them," he said. "Intelligence says they've had to deploy 2 additional fleets to Earth. No other conquest required more than 1. How long can we keep this up?" Hana asked. "As long as we have to. The moment we stop, we lose." Dr. Nari made a breakthrough by studying the captured alien and intercepted communications. She began to understand Cethal psychology. They were a hierarchical species. Everything was ordered, planned, systematic. They expected enemies to fight in predictable ways, mass battles, fortified positions, clear military targets. Humans were doing none of that. The chaos and unpredictability frustrated the Cethal commanders. They couldn't adapt their rigid strategies to an enemy that had no strategy, only stubborn survival. They're not used to fighting for years, Nari explained to Tiang. Their conquests are quick, overwhelming. Force immediate submission. We're in unknown territory for them. Good, Taeyang said. Let's keep them there. Not everyone agreed with the resistance. Some humans collaborated with the Cethal, hoping to survive by serving. Others simply gave up, too tired and traumatized to fight. Hana struggled with this. She saw neighbors who had suffered, who had lost everything. Who could blame them for wanting the war to end, even in defeat? But she also saw children growing up in the tunnels who had never known peace. She saw fighters who had lost families but kept going. She saw humans adapting, learning, becoming something harder and more dangerous. One night, a young woman came to her. Her name was Yuna, and she had been an engineer before the invasion. "I've been studying the Cethal power systems," Yuna said. "I think I can build something, an EMP device using their own technology against them. How? Every time we fight them, we capture pieces of their equipment. I've been collecting it, analyzing it. Their power cores emit a specific frequency. If we can amplify and reverse that frequency." Hana looked at the young woman's designs. She didn't understand half of it, but she understood hope. "Do it. Whatever you need." 6 months into the occupation, the war had changed. Earth was scarred, burning, broken. Billions were dead or enslaved. Cities lay in ruins, but humans were still fighting. In every occupied zone, resistance persisted. In orbit, Dezhou's squadron and others like it harassed Cethal supply lines. In bunkers worldwide, Taeyang coordinated an invisible army. The Sethal had expected 2 weeks. They got 6 months of bleeding wounds, and humans were learning. Every battle taught them something new. Every captured piece of technology was reverse engineered. Every tactical defeat became a lesson for the next fight. The Sethal Empire had never faced an enemy like this. Humans didn't fight to win glorious battles. They fought to survive one more day, and then another and another. They were hardened by loss, unified by suffering, and too stubborn to accept the impossible. The invasion had succeeded, but the war had just begun. 6 months became a year. Year became longer. The war ground on without end. Commander Taeyang moved between bunkers every 3 days. The Sethal had learned to track human leaders, so staying alive meant never staying anywhere long. He lived out of a single pack, slept 4 hours a night, and coordinated a global resistance network. That should have been impossible to manage. People called him the ghost of Earth. The Kretthal had a bounty on him, worth more than most planets. He didn't care about any of that. He cared about the reports flooding his screens. Resistance cell and logos destroyed. A supply depot. Minimal casualties on our side. Sydney cell reports Sethal are fortifying their command center, increasing patrols. Beijing needs medical supplies. Jakarta needs ammunition. On and on it went. Taeyang read each report, made decisions, sent orders. His staff worried about him burning out, but he couldn't stop. The moment he stopped, people would die. Captain Dezhou was no longer just a pilot. After losing so many friends, he had become a trainer. Every day new pilots arrived, young, scared, barely trained. Most would be dead within a month. That was the reality of fighting the Sethal space, but some would survive, some would learn, and those survivors would train the next generation. Remember, he told a group of rookie pilots, you're not trying to win battles, you're trying to live long enough to make the Sethal regret coming here. Hit them and run. Never stay to fight fair. Fair fights are how you die. A young pilot raised his hand. His name was Minyu, and he looked about 19. Sir, how do you deal with the fear? Dezhou considered lying, telling them the fear went away. But these kids deserve the truth. I don't. I'm scared every single time I launch, but I fly anyway. Because my fear doesn't matter. What matters is Earth. The rookies were quiet. They understood. In the tunnels of Seoul, Hana's network had evolved into something remarkable. What started as a few dozen people had become thousands. They had schools for children, hospitals, farms growing food, underground, even small factories producing equipment. The Sethal controlled the surface, but below, humanity endured. Hana walked through the tunnels, checking on her people. She stopped at a classroom where children sat learning math from a former professor. She visited a medical station where doctors treated wounded fighters with equipment stolen from the aliens. She inspected a workshop where engineers like Yuna built weapons from scraps. How's the EMP project? Hana asked Yuna. The young engineer looked exhausted, but excited. We're close, maybe 2 more months. The biggest challenge is power. We need a massive energy source to make it work. What kind of source? Ideally, a Sethal power core, but those are heavily guarded. Hana nodded. Let me talk to some people. She contacted Taeyang through encrypted channels. They spoke frequently now, coordinating operations between underground and orbital forces. We need to hit a major Sea-Thal facility. She told him, something with a power core we can steal. Taeyang pulled up tactical maps. There's a processing center in the Gobi Desert, heavily fortified but isolated. If we could coordinate a distraction, they planned. For weeks, resources from across the resistance network flowed toward the operation. Dihaho squadron would strike Sea-Thal positions in orbit, drawing their attention upward. Ground forces would hit facilities in Europe and South America, and during the chaos a small team would infiltrate the Gobi facility. Leading the ground team was a man named Hun. He had been special forces before the invasion, the kind of soldier who did missions that never appeared in official records. Now he led deep strike teams for the resistance. Han was quiet, focused, and terrifyingly effective. His team of 8 was the best Earth had left. Remember, he told them before the mission, we're not there to fight. We're thieves. Get in, steal the core. Get out. If we do our job right, the Sea-Thal won't even know we were there until we're gone. Dr. Nari had spent the past year becoming someone she never imagined. The scientist who wanted peaceful first contact was now a strategic analyst, studying enemy patterns and psychology. She had learned to think like the Sea-Thal. Their empire was vast but fragile. It relied on quick victories and overwhelming force. Long wars strained their resources and morale. They're spread too thin, she explained to Taeyang during a strategy session. Earth alone is tying down 3 invasion fleets. That's 3 fleets that can conquer new worlds or suppress rebellions elsewhere. Can we exploit that? Maybe, if we could make them believe we're about to become a real threat instead of just an annoyance. An idea began forming. It was risky and desperate, but this entire war was risky and desperate. The coordinated operation began on a Tuesday. Diho led his squadron against Sea-Thal supply ships in lunar orbit. They flew in patterns that seemed random, but forced the aliens to respond, pulling ships away from Earth. Simultaneously, resistance cells across the globe launched attacks, not major operations, just enough to make the Sea-Thal think something big was happening everywhere. At once, in the Gobi Desert, Hyan's team approached the processing facility. During a sandstorm, the Sea-Thal had sensors, but the storm created interference. Humans had learned to use Earth's own environment as a weapon. They moved like shadows. Hyan disabled sentries with precise strikes. His tech specialist hacked access points. His demolitions expert planted shaped charges, not to destroy but to create specific breaches inside the facility. They found the power core. It was massive, humming with energy, beautiful and terrible. Can you extract it? Hun asked his engineer. Give me 10 minutes. They didn't have 10 minutes. Alarm started blaring. Sea-Thal guards were coming. Hold them off, Han ordered. His team formed a defensive perimeter while the engineer worked frantically. The Sea-Thal hit them hard. Energy weapons tore through the facility. Jan's team returned fire with their scavenged and modified weapons. They knew the angles, the cover points, the kill zones. 3 of his team went down, but the engineer kept working. Done, she shouted, disconnecting the core. It was the size of a refrigerator and glowed with internal light. Move, Hyan ordered. They fought their way out, dragging the core and their wounded. the Sea Thou. Pursued, but the sandstorm covered their escape. They made it to the extraction point where a stolen Sea Thou transport waited. Han took one last look at the facility. 3 good people dead for one alien battery, but it might be worth it. Yuna received the power core like a child receiving a birthday present. She immediately began integrating it into her EMP device. This changes everything, she said, eyes bright with possibilities. With this much power, we can generate a pulse that will shut down Sea Thou equipment across an entire city. How big of a city? Hana asked. Seoul. Maybe bigger. It took another month to complete the device. During that time, Dr. Nari was developing her own plan. We need to make them afraid, she told Taeyong. Right now they see us as a persistent problem. We need to become an actual threat. How? We build a fake super weapon, something that looks like it could destroy their ships. We let them find evidence that we're reverse engineering their technology into something dangerous. It was a bluff, a massive planetary scale bluff, but Taeyong saw the genius in it. If they think we're about to even the playing field, they'll have to make a choice, commit more resources to Earth, potentially leaving other parts of their empire vulnerable, or negotiate. The K-Thou don't negotiate. They've never had to before. Maybe it's time they learned. The project began in the Gobi Desert. Using materials from destroyed Sea Thou equipment, they built a structure that looked like a massive weapon. It emitted energy signatures similar to Sea Thou ship killers. It had cooling systems, power conduits, targeting arrays. It was completely non-functional, but from the outside it looked real. They let Sea Thou reconnaissance spot it. They fed false information into captured communication systems. They created the illusion that humanity was 6 months away from deploying a weapon that could threaten the Sea Thou fleet. The aliens took the bait. K-Thou forces began massing around the Gobi facility. They pulled ships from other locations. They fortified positions. They prepared for a major assault, exactly as planned, with Sea Thou attention focused on the GOI resistant cells across Earth, prepared for the real operation. Yuna's EMP device was ready. Hyun's teams were positioned. DIO's pilots were loaded and armed, and Hana stood in the tunnels of Seoul, addressing thousands of people who had survived hell. Tomorrow we remind them what humans are capable of, she said. We've been hiding, surviving, enduring. Tomorrow we strike back, not for victory. We're not naive, but to show them that we'll never stop, that every day they stay on our world will cost them. The people cheered. They were tired, scared, scarred, but they were also angry and determined and human. Taeyang watched reports from his bunker. All the pieces were moving into position. The fake weapon in the GOI, the EMP in Seoul, strike teams worldwide, Diho's squadron in orbit. This is our gambit, he told his officers. Everything we've worked for comes down to the next 48 hours. If it works, we might force them to negotiate. If it fails, he didn't finish. They all knew what failure meant. Dr. Nari made one last transmission to the Sea Thou command ship. It was time to sell the bluff. This is Dr. Nari representing Earth's resistance. We're prepared to discuss terms for your withdrawal. The Sea Thou commander appeared on screen. His expression was contemptuous. You have nothing to negotiate with. We have something you've never faced before. Species that refuses to quit. Your empire has spent over a year trying to break us. How many resources have you wasted? How many ships? How many soldiers? Irrelevant. We will prevail, maybe, but we've been studying your technology. Learning, adapting soon. We won't just be pests, we'll be a real threat. Can your empire afford that? She cut the transmission before he could respond. The die was cast. Now they would see if the Seathal would blink. The Seathal didn't blink. They attacked. At dawn, the alien fleet launched a massive assault on the Gobi Desert facility. Dozens of ships converged on the fake weapon, determined to destroy it before humans could complete their supposed super weapon. Exactly as Taeyang had predicted. All units, this is Ghost. Execute the plan. Across Earth, resistant cells erupted into action while the Seathal focused on the Gobi. Humans struck everywhere else. In Seoul, Hana gave the signal. Yuna, now the young engineer, activated her EMP device. The stolen Seathal power core hummed to life, building energy to impossible levels. Then it released a pulse of electromagnetic energy, exploded outward. From the tunnels, it was invisible to human eyes but devastating to Seathal. Technology, shields flickered and died. Weapons shut down, communication systems went silent, even their armor's power assisted functions failed. For the first time since the invasion, K-Thal soldiers were vulnerable. Hana's fighters poured out of the tunnels like ants from a disturbed nest. They had been waiting for this moment, preparing for it. The aliens were stronger and taller, but without their technology, they were just soldiers, and humans knew how to fight. Soldiers, the battle for Seoul was brutal and close. Knives, clubs captured. Weapons, the Seathal were dangerous even without their shields, but they were also confused and frightened. Their empire had never prepared them for fighting like this. Across the city, the same scene played out. Resistance fighters emerged from hiding, hitting the disoriented aliens. Before they could adapt, it wasn't about winning, it was about causing maximum damage while the window was open. The EMP lasted 15 minutes before the power core burned out, but in those 15 minutes, Seoul's resistance killed more Seathal soldiers than in the previous year. Combined, in orbit, Captain Dejo led his squadron on their most daring mission. Yet, with most of the Seathal fleet focused on the Gobi, the orbital defense network was weakened. Target the flagship, Dejo ordered. We're going for the command ship. His pilots knew it was suicide. The flagship was the most heavily defended ship in the fleet, but if they could damage it even slightly, it might push the Seathal over the edge. They flew in a scattered formation, making themselves difficult targets. Seathal fighters intercepted them, and the void lit up with weapons fire. Dejo lost half his squadron in the first 30 seconds. Keep going, he shouted. We just need one hit. He loaded his last tungsten rod, the heaviest one he had. He calculated velocity, trajectory, and weak points based on everything humans had learned about Seathal ship design. Then he fired his engines to maximum and flew straight at the flagship. Enemy fire tore past him. His shields failed. His ship was coming apart, but he got close enough. He launched the tungsten rod at point-blank range, using his ship's dying momentum to add velocity. The rod punched through the flagship shield and into its hull, penetrating deep into the superstructure. It wasn't a killing blow, but it was damage, real Damage to a ship that was supposed to be invincible. Dezhou ejected seconds before his fighter exploded. He drifted in space hoping someone would pick him up, knowing he might die out here, but he had done his job on the ground. Lieutenant Hun's teams were hitting Cthal command centers. They had spent months mapping alien facilities, identifying weak points and planning infiltration routes. Hun's target was the planetary invasion coordinator in Moscow. It was a massive building, the brain directing all Cthal forces on Earth. Taking it out wouldn't end the invasion, but it would create chaos in their command structure. His team moved through the cities underground, emerging inside the building's perimeter. The Cthal had guards, sensors, and automated defenses. But humans had desperation and ingenuity. They fought floor by floor. Every room was a battle, high and lost. People, good soldiers who had survived a year of hell only to die in the final push, but they kept advancing. At the command center, high implanted explosives around the critical systems, not just to destroy, but to the Cthal could rebuild, but it would take time. Humans could use charges set, he reported to Taeyang, evacuating now, but as they tried to leave Cthal, reinforcements arrived, heavy infantry with weapons that could level buildings. Go. Hyan ordered his team. I'll hold them, sir. We can't. That's an order. Someone needs to detonate these charges manually. Might as well be me. His team retreated. Hun faced the Cthal alone, firing his weapon until it clicked. Empty. He threw grenades, used a knife, fought with his bare hands. The aliens cut him down, but he kept fighting even as he died. His last act was pressing the detonator. The Moscow command center exploded in a fireball that lit up the night sky. Cthal forces across Europe suddenly found themselves without central coordination. Local commanders struggled to maintain control as their carefully planned operations fell apart. Dr. Nari monitored the Cthal communication networks from her hidden lab. She could see their confusion growing. The attack on the Gobi had been a feint. The real attacks were everywhere else, and humans had coordinated it all without the Cthal detecting the plan. They're panicking, she told Taeyang over secure comms. I'm seeing frantic messages between ship commanders. They're asking for orders, but the command structure is fractured. Good, let them feel what we felt. Let them know chaos and fear. In the Gobi Desert, the Cthal fleet pounded the fake weapon facility into dust. They deployed ground forces to secure the area, only to find it empty. The weapon they had feared was just a shell, a prop in humanity's desperate theater. The alien commander realized too late they had been tricked. He tried to redirect forces to the real battles, but his ships were out of position. By the time they could respond, the damage was done. Seoul had cost them hundreds of soldiers. Moscow's command center was gone. The flagship was damaged. For the first time in Cthal history, a conquered species had executed a successful strategic deception. Commander Tiang watched the reports flow in from his bunker. The plan was working, but the cost was staggering. Thousands of humans dead. Entire resistance cells wiped out. Heroes like Hyan who would never be properly honored, but the Cthal were reeling. Sir, we're getting a transmission from the Cthal flagship. His communications officer said. Taeyang had been expecting this. Put it through. The alien commander appeared. his crystalline face harder to read than usual. But Nari had taught Tiang the subtle signs of Sithal emotion. This one was angry and possibly uncertain. You have achieved nothing, the commander said. These attacks change nothing. We will rebuild, we will crush your resistance. Then why are you talking to me? Taeyang asked calmly. The alien paused. It was a small hesitation, barely a second, but it was there. Taeyang pressed his advantage. You came to Earth expecting an easy conquest. 2 weeks, you thought. Maybe a month. You've been here for over a year. How much has this cost your empire? How many ships? How many soldiers? How many resources that could have been used to conquer easier worlds? Your resistance is temporary. Eventually you will break. Will we? We just struck you across the entire planet simultaneously. We fooled you into wasting your strength, attacking a fake target. We're learning your technology, your tactics, your weaknesses. Every day we survive, we become more dangerous. Dr. Nari joined the transmission. We've studied your empire's history, 40 worlds conquered, all within months. But what happens when a conquest takes years? What happens when the cost exceeds the value? Your empire is vast, but it's not infinite. The K-Thou commander's expression shifted. Tiang still couldn't read it perfectly, but he thought he saw doubt. Leave our world, Taeyang said. You can't break us, and trying is only making your empire weaker. Cut your losses while you still can, and if we refuse, then we'll keep fighting. We'll keep adapting, and maybe eventually we'll learn enough to bring the war to your worlds. Can your empire handle that? A species that doesn't surrender, armed with your own technology, spread across the stars. It was a bluff. Humanity barely controlled Earth, let alone had the capacity for interstellar war. But they, Sithal, didn't know that. All they knew was that these stubborn creatures had already exceeded every expectation. The commander ended the transmission. Without answering, Tiang leaned back, exhausted. Think it worked? I don't know, Nari admitted. We've pushed them harder than any species ever has, but their pride is enormous. They might decide that losing Earth is worse than the cost of taking it. In orbit, a damaged fighter retrieved Captain DeJoe from space. He was alive, barely. His suit breached in 3 places. The medics worked frantically to save him. Did we hit it? He asked through frozen lips. You hit it, sir. Tore a hole in the flagship's hull. DeJoe smiled and passed out. In Seoul, Hana surveyed the aftermath of the battle. Bodies everywhere, human and Sithal both. Buildings burned. Her people were exhausted, wounded, traumatized, but they had won. For the first time, they had taken territory back from the aliens and held it. Is this what victory looks like? A young fighter asked her. Hana looked at the devastation. No, this is what survival looks like. Victory comes later. Yuna's EMP device had burned out completely, the power core drained, but she was already designing a better one, learning from this prototype. If they could build more, if they could deploy them across the planet. Taeyang spent the next 3 days waiting for the Sithal response. His forces were depleted. They had thrown everything into this operation. If the aliens decided to retaliate with overwhelming force, humanity couldn't stop them. On the 4th day, the Sithal flagship broadcast a message. The Sithal Empire does not negotiate with lesser species, but we acknowledge that subjugating your world is inefficient. Our forces will withdraw within 30 days. Consider this mercy. The transmission ended for a long moment. Taeyang couldn't process it. Then his bunker erupted in cheers. His officers were crying, hugging, celebrating, but Taeyang remained quiet. He thought about all the people who had died for this moment. Hyan detonating explosives as he fell, the countless pilots lost in space, the civilians executed by the Sithao, the cities reduced to rubble. They had won, but the price had been almost everything. The 30 days felt longer than the entire war. Nobody truly believed the Sithao would leave. Surely this was a trick. Surely they were gathering forces for one final devastating attack. Commander Taeyang kept his forces on high alert. Trust nothing until their last ship is gone, he ordered. They could change their minds at any moment, but the Sithao didn't change their minds. They began their withdrawal with mechanical efficiency. Troops evacuated from cities, equipment was loaded onto ships. Towers came down. Within 2 weeks, most of their ground forces were gone. Humans watched from hiding, still not daring to believe. Captain Dezhou recovered in a medical station on the dark side of the moon. His body was broken, 3 ribs cracked, lungs damaged from vacuum exposure, severe radiation burns. The doctor said he would never fly again. Want to bet? He asked them with a weak smile. Young pilots came to visit him, the ones he had trained. Some brought flowers. Others brought data pads showing the footage of his attack on the flagship. You're a legend, sir, one of them said. Dio shook his head. I'm just a pilot who got lucky. The real legends are the ones who didn't make it back. He looked at the empty beds around him. Pilots who had died in the final battle. Remember them, honor them by living. Well, in Seoul, Hana walked through her city for the first time in over a year. Without hiding, the Sithao were gone from the streets. The towers were being dismantled, but the scars remained. Entire neighborhoods had been leveled. Thousands of her people were dead or missing. The survivors looked like ghosts, thin and haunted and barely able to comprehend that the nightmare might actually be ending. She found the location where they had ambushed that first Sithao patrol. What felt like a lifetime ago. The market district was rubble now, destroyed in the fighting, but a small memorial had been built there by survivors, names carved into broken concrete, flowers left by people who refused to forget. We held, she whispered to the memorial. We held our ground. Dr. Nari worked frantically to decode and preserve Sithao technology before they could destroy it. Some alien equipment was being deliberately sabotaged before withdrawal. Power cores were drained, computers were wiped. Sithao didn't want humans learning too much, but they couldn't destroy everything. Nari and teams of scientists across the globe collected fragments, recordings, data. Every piece of alien technology was precious, now the foundation for humanity's future. Look at this, Yuna said, showing Nari a scan of a Sithao engine component. This is how they achieve faster than light travel. It's based on principles we barely understand, but if we could replicate even a fraction of it, we could leave the solar system. Nari finished. We could finally reach the stars. The 2 women looked at each other. They had survived hell. They had helped defeat an empire, and now they might unlock the secret to humanity's future. On day 28, something unexpected Happened, a small Sea-Thal shuttle landed. Outside Taeyang's current bunker. Single alien emerged, unarmed. Broadcasting on all frequencies. I wish to speak with the one called. Ghost. Taeyang's guards were ready to shoot, but he held up his hand. Stand down, let's hear what it has to say. The alien was escorted into the bunker. It was the commander from the flagship, the one who had broadcast the withdrawal message. You came personally? Taeyang asked. I needed to understand, the Krethel said. For a year I have tried to comprehend how a primitive species could resist the Empire. I reviewed every battle, every strategy, and I finally realized you never fought to win. You fought simply to continue fighting. That's how humans work. We're stubborn. It is more than stubbornness. It is a fundamental difference in thinking. My species conquered 40 worlds because we broke their will immediately, but your will cannot be broken because you never expected to win in the first place. You only expected to survive. Taeyang nodded. When you came here, you saw primitives with inferior technology. But you didn't understand what we actually are. We're survivors. Earth has killed most of the species that evolved here. Ice ages, asteroids, plagues, wars. We survived all of it. You were just one more thing trying to kill us. The K-Thal was silent for a moment. The Empire will mark Earth as unconquerable. No future expedition will target your world, but I have a warning for you. There are species in the galaxy far more dangerous than the Sea-Thal. If you venture into the stars, you will face them. Then we'd better be ready, Taeyang said. Alien commander left without another word. 2 days later, the last Sea-Thal ship departed Earth's orbit. Scanners tracked them until they entered faster than light and vanished. They were gone. Celebration was global but subdued. Too many had died. Too much was destroyed. Earth was free but broken. Taeyang stood on the surface for the first time in months, looking at the sky without alien ships blocking it. He was 53 years old and felt like 100. Every part of him hurt. Every breath reminded him of injuries that would never fully heal. His second officer found him there. Sir, the council wants to meet with you. They're talking about rebuilding, about what comes next. What comes next? Taeyang repeated. He thought about all the people who would never see this moment. All the sacrifices. What comes next is we make sure it wasn't for nothing. The years that followed were hard in different ways, rebuilding a shattered world, dealing with trauma, burying the billions of dead, arguments about how to move forward, but humanity did what it always had. It survived and adapted. Dr. Nari led the scientific effort to understand K-Thal technology. She worked with teams across the globe, piecing together the puzzle of faster than light travel. It took 5 years of failures and setbacks. Then on a cold morning, a test ship named Hope activated the first human-built FTL drive. It worked for 3 seconds before shutting down, but those 3 seconds proved it was possible. Nari cried when she saw the data. Yuna hugged her, both women laughing through tears. They had done it. Humanity could reach the stars. Captain Dho never flew in combat again. The doctors had been right about that, but he trained the next generation of pilots, teaching them the lessons learned in blood. The universe is dangerous, he told his students. There are species out there more powerful than us, but we have something they might not expect. We know how to lose and keep fighting. Anyway, his academy became legendary. Pilots trained by Daiho were known across Earth as the best, not because they won the most fights, but because they survived impossible situations. Hana rebuilt Seoul not as it was, but as something new. The tunnels that had sheltered them during the war became parks and memorials. Buildings rose from the rubble, designed to be beautiful, but also defensible. She led the city's council for 20 years, always remembering the people she had lost. Every decision she made was haunted by the question, would this honor their sacrifice? On the anniversary of the invasion, she stood at the memorial in the old market district, now a vast garden with thousands of names carved in stone. We held our ground, she said to the crowd gathered there, not because we were strong enough, not because we were brave enough, but because we refused to let you down, and we never will. 10 years after the Seathal withdrawal, humanity launched its first deep space exploration vessel. It was small, experimental, built on reverse engineered alien technology and human ingenuity. The ship's name was Tiang. Commander Tiang had died 5 years earlier, his body finally giving out from the accumulated damage of war, but his legacy lived on in every human who looked at the stars without fear. At the launch ceremony, Dr. Nari gave a speech. She was older now, her hair gray, but her eyes still bright with wonder. When the Seathal came, they saw us as primitives, animals, things to be conquered, but they learned something important. Humans don't measure strength by technology. We measure it by endurance, by adaptation, by the refusal to quit, even when quitting makes sense. She gestured to the Taeyong, sleek and powerful, ready to venture into the unknown. They wanted to take our world. Instead, they taught us how to take theirs, not through conquest. We're better than that, but through exploration, through understanding, through the same stubbornness that let us survive. The ship launched its FTL drive. Activating smoothly, it vanished into the stars, carrying a crew of humans, ready to face whatever waited out there. On Luna Base, Admiral Dejo watched the launch with his students. He was in a wheelchair now, his body betraying him after years of punishment, but he smiled. Do you think we'll find more aliens out there? A student asked. Definitely, Dejo said. The galaxy is vast, but I'll tell you what I learned. Fighting the Seathal, it doesn't matter how powerful the enemy is. It doesn't matter how advanced their technology. If humans have one thing, it's the ability to make any fight cost more than its worth. Is that enough? It kept us alive when nothing else could. I'd say that's enough. In the decades that followed, humanity spread cautiously into the stars. They found other species, some friendly, some hostile, some indifferent, but every alien species that encountered humans learned the same lesson the Seathal had learned. Humans were small, humans were fragile. Humans had less advanced technology than most galactic species, but humans never quit. They would adapt to any environment, learn any technology, survive any disaster. They didn't fight wars to win glorious victories. They fought to make sure the cost of defeating them was too high to pay. The Seathal Empire never bothered Earth again. Their records marked it as the only successful resistance in their history. Future Seathal commanders studied the Earth campaign as a lesson in hubris. You could conquer humans, but you could never break them, and the cost of trying might destroy you. Hana lived to be 92. On her deathbed, surrounded by grandchildren who had never known war. She looked at the ceiling of her room. Outside, Seoul lived and thrived, built on the bones of the city she had defended. Did we win? One of her grandchildren asked. Hana smiled. We survived. That was always the victory. She closed her eyes for the last time. And in her final moments she stood again in the tunnels, surrounded by people who refused to surrender, people who looked at the impossible and said, "Make us." Earth healed slowly, painfully but steadily. The scars remained. You could still see them if you knew where to look. Ruins that were left as memorials, empty spaces where cities once stood, the names carved in stone, billions of them remembering the dead. But humanity endured. They built ships and sailed the stars. They made allies and faced enemies. They explored wonders and confronted horrors. And whenever another species looked at humans and saw primitives, saw weakness, saw something to be conquered, they learned the same lesson. Humans were hardened by their own planet, forged by competition with each other, tempered by disasters that would have ended other species. They didn't need to be the strongest, they just needed to refuse to quit. The galaxy was vast and full of powers that dwarfed humanity, but it had learned a new phrase, translated awkwardly into 1,000 alien languages but clear in meaning. Humanity, yeah, because when alien invaders descended, expecting easy victory, they found something they had never encountered before: humans standing their ground,